walking in this room like constantly.
Wade.
My lighting is always bad. Hello, Wade.
Hey.
Hi, Ann. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Wade, how appropriate is this title? Have you read this one, Wade?
Solitude in Society. I have not read it, but it's lived experience, is it not?
Yeah.
It's all about isolation, alienation, and the consciousness.
Now, are you feeling isolated?
Not at all. I miss my concerts, and that's about it. And I would much rather teach in person than online.
My daughter Etta has something very important to show you. She painted
Ooh,
her
look at those
fingernails.
nails.
Oh, wow.
Very nice blue.
Cool.
Those are toenails, but you know.
Those are some icy looking nails. I like them. Very styling.
Now my partner is kind of staring at us from afar. It's bedtime. Etta, do you want to say goodnight to everybody?
Etta, do you want to say hi to the pugs before you say goodbye?
Oh yeah, let's see. Say hi to the pugs. Look, it looks just like Phoebe. We have a black pug in our family.
Nice.
Everybody's ready for the future to arrive.
My dog
I
said,
think you're in it. And
Are we?
well,
This is it?
for a while.
This is as good as it gets, Wade?
For a while, and then we have a mini dark age, for a while. And then things will pick back up, but
I guess you can't say it's not an interesting time to live.
you will be able to say something. I'm saying some of my tenured track colleagues, right, within their first or second year. No, even the oldest of old timers, and in our department we have some serious old timers, like have never had a year like this. I mean, you've never seen. I mean, they'll talk about the year we had a week of snow days, right?
Yeah.
Thing ever, or the horrible budget cut of. But this is, and this we're only beginning of it, right? Because the aftershocks will be. I mean, that's my prediction based on what little data.
Oh yeah, I mean, Kentucky, Arizona, Michigan, Boise State, WashU have all started furloughing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's like
freeze.
graded furloughs, so like out for like 10 days or 14 days.
Price of improvement is failure. Welcome to Liquid Philosophy.
Welcome back, everybody. We are doing a second episode of our third season of Liquid Philosophy, and joining us are Ann Parsons and Wade Mackey. And with us, as always, are also Justin and Jeremy. And I'm Mary Ann. We are going to continue the themes from last episode, probably starting off with a quick cheers and a quick toast. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the first episode from our third season and our special video podcasts that we are now calling a vodcast. So cheers. Welcome back.
Zdrowie.
Salute. So Ann Wade, welcome. Also joining us as one of our, we call you a big fan, Wade, because we feel like you're one of the 2 or 3 people who have at least seen 1 or 2 episodes of the podcast. And Ann Parsons, who we were super impressed by the op-ed that you just wrote.
Yep.
And so in the Greensboro News and Record, yes. And
And it was even referenced in one of their own editorials like a few days later. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, cool. I didn't see that.
Interesting. So we're going to get into lots of fun conversations that these 2 folks are a part of. So, Ann, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to just put in a plug that I really liked the video podcast from last week. I was able to watch some today, that kind of thing. And I really like seeing your faces. I also like seeing Justin's hair, it keeps me going during this time. So anyway, that's a plug. But about me, I'm a public historian. That means, history for everyday people, how everyday people remember things, that kind of thing. And yeah, I've been at UNCG for 7 years, something like that. But I am super excited just to be hanging out with you guys today, because I think particularly you guys last week were really talking about a lot of stuff about community engagement, or thinking about the meaning of everything that's happening, how this is affecting communities, how this is affecting scholarship. And it's just been so on my brain in the midst of like wiping butts and making dinner and like responding to student emails. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then I've been thinking about these big, juicy questions. So I'm just excited to be here talking with you guys tonight.
I'm going to make
Juicy questions and wiping butts. What a pair. You also have something coming up on May 13th. Would you like to promote that, Anne?
Oh yeah. I'm organizing right now in May sometime. It's going to be the week of May 11th or week of May 18th, a virtual writing retreat for folks who are interested. Because I know there are, at least for me, my research has just been wackadoodle in all of this. Like, it's just been hard to keep up with everything. And so we're doing a virtual writing retreat with hopefully a Be Here Club, Zoom happy hour one day, doing some write on sites, doing a community engagement discussion about how to do community engagement while social distancing, that kind of stuff, and people can come for part or all. So details are coming. It'll be either the week of the May 11th, or the week of May 18th, based on when I can get my act together and organize it, just to be honest.
If people want to stay in the loop, what's the best way to do that?
I think if people want to stay in the loop, they should email me at Ann Parsons, A.E. Parson at uncg.edu. We will also be broadcasting it, so keep your eyes open on like the list for the Office of Community Engagement, Office of Research Development, HNAC. It's gonna probably be going on those lists and stuff like that too, so keep your eye open.
And there's a Canvas page, right? So people from UNCG could just join the writing group Canvas page, which I think, is it Paul and you that are running that?
Yeah. So separately, we have a faculty writing community Canvas page, which has all writing opportunities that people want, write on sites, writing accountability groups, reading and writing groups. Sometimes people just, post stuff just for general discussion. So if anybody wants to join that, to also email me, and then we can get them to be a member. And then you at least get announcements of what kind of writing supports there are on campus right now, which is pretty good. It's all kind of grassroots, by the seat of our pants, just trying to support each other with putting our fingers on the keys. Also, congratulations, is it Jeremy and Miriam, for sending out books in the last couple of months. So congratulations, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Appreciated, much appreciated. Thank you. All right, Wade, you want to tell us a little bit about you and what you do at UNCG?
Whatever they need me to do. My official role is the director of the Liberal Studies program. That's an online degree program in the College of Arts and Sciences. But I'm also a senior lecturer in the Department of Philosophy, and I've been here around 16 years, depending on how you count now. But it's starting to feel like I'm one of the older people in the room. A lot of the stuff. I don't know, when you get to that point where it's like, a lot of people looking like I know things because I've been here. Oh boy. So that's kind of where I'm at. But if you could talk about research tracks or administrative tracks, I might be on the service track because I just do a lot of different things. Sort of a random tour of, oh, they need me to do something. Who gets to do that? Let's try that. Let's collect that experience. And so that's kind of what I've been doing for a long time.
Andrew, are you still a faculty senator?
I completed my 2 terms, and I took the generous retirement plan at that point.
Which sends you to Raleigh?
And they sent me to Raleigh, right? So I was recruited at the end of my last Senate term to be the faculty assembly representative. So this was my first year in faculty assembly, and that they're all great experiences, great and terrible experiences at the same time. And Marianne, you and I served in Senate a while.
We were senators. I took the early out clause.
That's right. But faculty assembly is like your local group, only supersized, right? It's like the national tractor pull championship rather than just the local guys at the barn. But there's some similarities. But you learn a lot of things because that's when we see like what they're talking about there with the presidents and the various system administration. Like that's what our chancellor and provost are hearing like that same week. And you see, so what's really in the control of our administration versus what are sort of directives from Raleigh. And Raleigh means it could be system, it could be board of governors, or it could be the legislature. And sort of we're on that sort of front line of listening in and occasionally saying, oh, wait, no, that would break something. Please don't do that. Because they don't know, because they are so far removed from what we all do on a daily basis. So great experience if you get the opportunity. We're looking for 2 alternates now.
I'm on the ballot as an alternate and a full member, I think.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I'm just starting my first year as a senator. So
As a senator.
How do you take the early out? That's what I want to know.
Well, technically I finished somebody else's term and then did my own term. And so it was not quite the same plan of succession as the president of the United States, but
So
I swapped it out and became grad director. That's how I did it. So
you finished someone else's term. So is that similar to when you finished Provost Dunn's wine that one time?
hey, I forgot about that. That was pretty funny. Yeah.
She didn't want it to go to waste, and she wanted to channel the powers of the provost.
I did.
True story. So is this WTF2? Is that what this title is?
WTF too. So what's your take on all this?
I'm just wondering what we're gonna do for 3, because I think this is our 4th fan, and we don't have any more.
It's been a good run. It's been a good run.
There's no better time for you to do this, because one of the fun things that I've been doing the last few weeks is a bunch of faculty have started playing a diplomacy game through Zoom. Most of us had never played diplomacy, and very little playing occurs. But as people are that isolated and sort of lonely and starved for anything, so I think your invitation would be well received to anybody you extended it to right now. And we're generally available.
Right. That's also true.
Cool.
Well, didn't somebody reached out to you, right, Marianne, to get this thing going, right? Didn't you get an email or something?
I feel like right before
You did.
Justin, you really said, hey, let's get this going. And then Matt in the office of the communications office, he got in touch with me and asked me, hey, are you doing this still? And I said, well, funny you should mention that, because we were already talking about having the last episode scheduled. And so I let him know, hey, here we are. So if you want to be on the show, if you're watching right now and you want to be on the show, email Justin. Email Justin.
Well, I have to say, it was really, not just participating. I don't know, there's both, people being able to join just to connect in that way, but also it's just really listening to other faculty talking about it in a slightly, it's hard to say, I love you guys. It's hard to say it's more elevated, but it was more elevated. Than me just basically bitching with, is cursing allowed here? I don't know.
Sure, it's required. It's required.
Justin's on, so of course it is.
Go watch Bob Weinberg's episode and then.
All right, got it. Anyway, but basically me just having issues with something and talking to friends on the phone. You know what I mean? There's that, but this is it was useful to be to be listening. And I think that this is actually, I'm glad that you guys rebooted it now, because I know I look forward to listening going forward, just generally hearing what people are thinking about, what people are experiencing, that kind of thing in a way. And also being able to listen to people that aren't necessarily in my circle. You know what I mean? People on other parts of campus, who are having different experiences, that kind of thing.
And I'll throw out Bill Johnson. The Bill Johnson episode was really, he was really honest, and sooner or later you hear a chancellor or a provost in a variety of formats, but actually getting to sit and listen to Bill just lay it out there was great. And that's just, there's many other people you've done that for. So I'm really glad, and it's an honor to be here.
Cool.
Honor to have you both.
Hey.
Now, Wade, did you listen to the AAUP webinar today on financial exegesis?
I did not. I was clearing brush. That's why I'm a little pink and red. Today was an outdoor, chop things down, haul them away kind of thing. But what did they say about? Did you
Well,
financial exegesis?
I have this feeling that like financial exegesis is Justin's version of Jeremy's neoliberalism. You like just went in hard fast.
Well, it was the only reason I bring it up was because it was today.
Yeah.
But
What did
I
they say?
mean, it's scary. I mean, tied to what we were talking about, like at the beginning when we started recording about all the universities that are starting to do furloughs, and it's basically talking about what are the rights of faculty when program or universities are no longer financially stable, and they have to cut faculty lines, staff, or even full programs or departments. And so they went back to, I guess there was something, I was, doing class stuff and listening to that in one ear, so I didn't get a full. They're sending me the recording tomorrow. But a lot of it was scary because it's like, I mean, unless you're like a tenured professor, there isn't a whole lot of protections out there for you at this point. And even if you're tenured, they gave some examples of times where you could still get cut. So I didn't walk away feeling uplifted. I don't think that was the point. I think it was more informative. So, I think, we have to like think about what is on the horizon for us because we're, I think Wade just said, we're just at the tip of it, right? Like what's going to come, obviously, what's that?
You want me to scare you a bit?
Yes, please.
I mean, you have to, I mean, I can scare you a bit and then I want to walk some things back. The scary part is we just went a budget cut at UNCG because our numbers of students this year was less than our number of students last year, which means that the budget we would get next year is less. And it's not just money. They didn't just cut money because money comes to us from the state as money tied to a position. So we had to return money and positions. That meant that some open position had to be canceled, a retirement unfulfilled, or someone would have to be laid off. As I understand it, we didn't have to do that this year, but that was pre-COVID. That was pre-having to refund a lot of student fees and other monies. That was pre-having to give up a lot of revenues from events and other things that happen on campus. And then you say, how many students are coming back next fall? And then how many students planned to come to college and then won't in the fall? And any number you come up with is that much more of a budget cut we would face next year. Add to that, and some of you are in faculty senate, so you've seen this data I presented from faculty assembly. Over the next 20 years, there's a significant drop in the number of 18 to 24-year-olds coming to college. So there's a lot of reason to be worried about these things. And you correctly point out when they declare financial exigency, like—
Yeah, that's the word.
It was like an exegesis. I mean, I didn't know where you were going with it.
Exegesis, that's what I was trying to say.
But when they do that, and non-tenured faculty, I mean, we are very scared because we know who's first, off the boat in that regard. But here's the good news, and it's not great news, but North Carolina, and this is coming from people I've talked to who know more than I do, that North Carolina is actually a wealthier state than most, in part because they've been so stingy over the years by not spending money on other things. Like they have a bit of a cushion to absorb this, and that I have asked point blank about furloughs, salary cuts. And and this is what we've even heard at faculty assembly. There's been no discussion of that. Whereas, it's already happened in other states because we're not that bad off. But we still locally know that every student we lose is that much more of a budget cut. And at some point, and for those of you who've been here, remember the 2013, it doesn't take too many students to suddenly everyone's having to give up a full-time line or someone who retires isn't replaced. So that's kind of the scoop on that.
I heard our faculty senate chair today say the exact same thing, that North Carolina is a wealthy state. And,
We're not the same people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then I was kind of like, okay, well, I hear that, but at the same rate, it's like in the next breath, he said, our faculty senate chair said, well, but then it all depends on, we're not going to cut anybody now, but, all the facilities costs, all the things that if we don't go in the fall, all the kind of carry-on effects that can happen. I'm paraphrasing what he said. So he was like, good news, bad news kind of thing. And, and so it's similar to what you just said. And it's like, So, the uncertainty of it and the anxiety that it creates in people, I'm sure. So I know you asked that question today on the provost thing, huh? There was a question directly related to what you just said, Justin. Now I know, that was Justin who asked the question.
Well, I actually asked that. I sent it to Andrea and Anthony for the chancellor and provost tomorrow, but they asked it today. And so I sent it back. I was like, I was like, please ask this tomorrow to the people that actually work here currently, because I'm curious.
Yeah.
So what this episode is now called the Exegesis.
Exegesis.
Hey, it's not my area of expertise, right?
Justin, because you're affiliated with AAUP, and then with for those folks, Jeremy, if you're doing faculty senate, Wade, faculty assembly, like what can everyday faculty, is there anything that we can do in terms of supporting staff, faculty generally at all ranks, at all, types of hires, also our students? I know I've been dealing a lot with graduate students, but, other than the like individual responses, are there any things we can do? Like, is really trying to be more connected to AAUP, more involved, or being proactive about, these things that we're getting from faculty senate and places for responses? Or anyway, are there any thoughts, or is for the most part, is it kind of a wait and see? I don't know. I will say in parentheses, I'm coming from Illinois, which was, the Illinois system really was like bankrupt, when we're talking about kind of
the whole state is, yeah.
Oh yeah, the whole state, like before, like if, a few years ago, just was really gutted, just in terrible financial straits.
They didn't have a budget for like 2 years, right?
What was
they
that?
didn't have a budget for like 2 years, right?
Yeah,
We're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there.
yeah. The flip side is that it also was, there were a lot of faculty unions. Like I've also come from places where, so I'm coming from University of Illinois, Chicago, where there was faculty union, graduate student unions.
Oh, we just lost
She froze.
froze.
It's our first freeze.
Oh.
Brain freeze, everyone drink.
Yeah.
Cheers. For Anne to come back.
That's a good picture though. Can we get a still frame of that?
Right?
Well,
I do like a screenshot of
It's like she's
She's in the midst of.
Yeah. All right. I don't know how. Let me see if.
Well, this happened when I was on the AAP webinar early. She might have to log back in or something.
Gotcha.
We might lose.
But it was pretty interesting though. Like I'm definitely want to sit down and pay attention to the whole thing once I get the recording tomorrow. I mean, they were talking about that's one thing about the AAP is that like since they've been around for so long and they've been involved in like the intimate dealings of faculty on diverse campuses for a century, they've sort of accrued a lot of information and best practices and policies. And, so they were sort of going through their like definitions of, say the word, Wade.
Financial exigency.
Exigency, yeah.
Financial exegesis.
Financial exegesis.
There she is.
There she is.
I said the word union. I said the word union, and the North Carolina government shut me down. No, I'm joking. That is a total joke.
They censored you. They censored you.
My internet, to be clear, my internet. Going back.
They heard AAUP and they were like, shut it down.
Yeah, right.
The G-men are after us.
Not at all, are we? Oh.
And I thought you asked a very good question.
Yeah, I did
what
too.
What faculty do?
Yeah.
And I think there are multiple answers that people could give, but the one that I think is most important is to work with the student success people. I mean, on our campus, Andrew Hamilton, I mean, this is his number one priority. And I don't work for the guy, but his number one priority is how do we support the students we have? How do we encourage them to keep progressing with college and not drop out? And how do we attract students to come here? Because that, more than anything else, determines all of our local circumstances. And you see that, and those of you in Faculty Senate, you've been passing these sort of policies, and you're about to look at extending the sort of, what do they call, the academic relief package through the summer. Well, those are all designed to try to alleviate the student stress and concern that they have so that they come back. And ultimately, that's like the best we can do and have the most immediate impact.
Yeah, that's certainly the message that administration's been sending out, and that, you know, through Senate I've been hearing is, you know, keep learning, keep teaching, keep researching, which I kind of find comical to some extent, because it's like our only response is like work, and you know, there's no kind of nuance to that. Although I do agree with you, Wade, that I think, you know, at the local level, working with students to get them registered. So we've gotten all these messages like, just try to get as many people registered for summer and fall as you can, right? Because that'll have a effect on staff and faculty in terms of the, you know, the ability for us not to cut positions, for example, or for, you know, for this institution to thrive and continue. So I mean, I wish there was more I could answer. So I think it is a great question too. I just wish there was more of an answer than that, because I feel like that's kind of the Protestant, I just wrote the Protestant worth ethic kind of coming through, you know. I just wrote a piece for, and so I think the other thing we can do is this kind of thing, like Liquid Philosophy, or other kind of public outlets of ways that we can get our ideas out there. I just wrote a piece with a colleague of mine for the Peace and Justice Studies Association, hopefully, which will go up as a kind of a position paper on their website, talking about higher ed, and like, don't cave to the kind of fear. We need some creative, innovative leadership. That, and I'm thankful that I think our institution has that, and I'm not just saying that to like kiss the butts of those in power, but I mean, given, you know, our chancellor's, you know, piece in the paper yesterday that Justin sent to me, thank you. You know, that you know, that kind of innovative approach, I think is needed, and I appreciate that. I don't think I think the rest of the college and the higher ed universe around the country doesn't really have a lot of that innovation, and there's too much of the kind of neoliberal kind of thinking, right? I had to say it. There's too much of that within higher administration around the country. And I think if colleges and universities get caught in that kind of, you know, bean counting kind of mentality, it's going to go poorly.
You know, the provost candidate today said something that was interesting, that I was aware of the concept but never really thought about it. And Wade, you would probably know if this is going on here. But she talked about, you know, the future of building the ranks of students here. It's like, well, we need to go more outside the state, right? And, you know, I remember, I'm from Illinois, so Big Ten country. Minnesota and Wisconsin, the states of Minnesota and Wisconsin used to have, if you lived in Minnesota, you could go to Wisconsin school for the state price and vice versa. They stopped that because too many people from Minnesota were going to Wisconsin and not enough from Wisconsin to Minnesota, probably because Madison's a better school than Twin Cities.
It's also colder.
What's that?
It's colder in Minnesota. We were fleeing, as a Minnesota kid, we were fleeing
right.
the warmth of Wisconsin.
There you go. Yeah, the warmth. But like, what, you know, is that something we could make it available to Virginians in South Carolina for a great, not necessarily, I mean, I guess it could be the tuition price of in-state, but if it's greatly reduced, you know, kids always want to go away from home, but parents don't want them to go too far, but like, you know, and this campus has got a diverse programs and diverse faculty and diverse student body, so it's attractive in a number of ways. It might be a way to think about how we could boost numbers. It was interesting to hear her say it today.
We're looking at that, you know, faculty assembly. I mean, the system is looking at it. The problem is New England is hit worse than we are. Right? Population decline in the number of colleges. And so they're coming for our kids. Right? So there's sort of we'll do that, but everyone else is kind of looking to do that too. And then it's a matter of, can you really get a lower priced option?
Well, and the other thing the provost candidate said today was the kind of workforce development approach, because you look at the population in North Carolina, the demographics are going down, but the level of college educated folks is not that high, right? And so there's a lot of space to do some kind of workforce development, but adult learning type of work that we got to pivot that way a little bit too, probably.
Like building certificates or something, or what?
Could be, or yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of different things. I mean, or just bringing in kind of working professionals and people who want to go back and get their BA, which is of course a lot of what your student body weight is in BLS, right?
Have you heard the phrase partway home?
Partway home.
So all faculty should know this sort of partway home initiative. This is, nationwide sort of trend. And it specifically is the idea of finding all of the people who had some college and dropped out. With our graduation rates at universities always around 50, plus or minus 10, 15%. There's a lot of people, millions in North Carolina, that have some college but didn't finish. So they're somewhere in their workforce. And so programs like liberal studies, but other programs at UNCG as well, are deliberately focused on, can we recruit more of those people to come back and complete a degree?
Right.
And some schools are really good at it. I mean, A&T, our neighbor across town, they rebranded Partway Home to be Aggies at the Goal Line.
Oh, okay.
And what they actually, that's a great one, right? And we just said Spartans at Thermopylae just doesn't work the same way, right? Too much. But what they actually do is they go and they find students' records, and then they see, here's what we could do with what they have to get them the fastest time to complete their bachelor's degree, which makes them eligible for a whole lot of jobs, because they're often not going to try a whole new career arc. They just need that degree to get a promotion. And then they actually cold call them, and they say, you were a student here in 1995. Well, we can graduate you in 12 months or 18 months if you come back and the courses are picked out. And all universities are starting to do more of this. I would say UNCG is a little bit behind A&T in that regard, but we're getting there.
I also think there's something to be said in terms of the way that industries are changing and how we might also adopt a similar idea when it comes to perhaps workforce development for people who already have a solid skill set but might have zero college history. So I have a friend of mine who right now he's working with an organization where they are trying to work with people who have been displaced because they've been truck drivers for their entire lives. And they've been displaced by Amazon because Amazon's developing their own delivery systems. And so here they are thinking that they had their entire career path, planned out. They were going to drive trucks for the rest of their lives and then retire. And they're having to look for new options for work. And so what his organization is doing is that he's saying, hey, you do realize that your knowledge base is not that far off from being some sort of an engineering degree in sort of in a practical way. And so trying to say, hey, we'll get you there in 9 months, as opposed to you having to go back for 4 years. And so some of this goes back to Justin or Jeremy, one of you brought up like the idea of certificates, but it might even be something more creative like that, in terms of there are folks who need to get reskilled real fast. And maybe UNCG is not the place to do that, but really thinking about, hey, what knowledge base do you already have already, and where can we get you pretty quickly, so that you can take whatever next, maybe it's not career path oriented, maybe it's something else altogether and innovative and creative that we haven't even thought of. But I do want to say one thing about, Anne, your question in terms of what do we do, although I'm going to open up my next beer. I think one of the things that we need to do in terms of organizing is organize. And perhaps it's around AAUP. Maybe that's the best way for us to start thinking about this. But I think because so many of us are researchers and teachers and service oriented, we have a tendency, I think, to do the wait and see. And it's like, oh, how is this going to unfold? And then how do I make sense of it? But I think we're in a moment right now where we have to shape it, or it's going to get shaped for us.
Yep.
And so we've got to, hear all of the time that our voices as faculty aren't appreciated or respected once you start getting up the chain too far. And I get that. At the same time, I'm like, I can't accept that. And I feel as a communication person, like I want to change that, because we do important stuff and we are important in this entire process. And things are going to change. And we somehow need to be a part of that. We need to insert ourselves in the conversation much more directly and effectively.
Sounds like a job for somebody who's already tenured.
I know, right? That's we have to do that. Like that's where I'm like, the fool's gonna do it. Or we think about it in creative ways in terms of there are great faculty whose research has substantially changed, or they've had to put primary projects on the back burner, but they're great advocates and they're people who are great at this. There are people like me right now where I'm like, yeah, I'm a great communicator, but my research is on food and communication and I need it there right now. So I can't focus much of my attention on how do I be a good advocate for faculty. And so it's like, how do we enlist the people who are sitting right now trying to figure out what's my service? What do I do? How do I use my voice right now? Because I can't use it in some of the ways that I've used it in the past.
So are you suggesting that their service contribution could be organization of faculty and staff?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so. And I think that should be counted.
Absolutely.
I mean,
trying to organize or articulate faculty visions in this time of changing higher ed, both around faculty, staff, students, learning how, neoliberalism and how it's playing out in the campus. I mean, I guess, Justin, do you think AAUP is a place, is kind of the vehicle, like a good vehicle?
I think it could be. And let me say that the only reason that I'm the vice president of AAUP is because Wade cornered me at the Taste of Thai restaurant.
Like that.
Literally. I think John Tudge was with you, I think, and put me in the corner and be like, hey, you're the vice president now. I was like, well, let me think about this. And then we sat down and then they announced me as the vice president.
All things are done, sir.
The puppeteer is right over here if you want to ask him how things should be done. But, I mean, I think it certainly can be. We have a strong chapter. We have an active chapter. It certainly could be stronger and more active, but I think as things go, it's well respected across the state. I don't know outside perceptions, but I think there are people in place because most of the people that are active in it have been here for millennia. So, they know people, they're connected, they're strong voices. So I think that it's a good conduit to connecting people. We need to be more active about doing so. Not that we haven't tried, but I think that something like this, what's going on now, puts the fire under people's asses, that okay, maybe we should start to pay more attention to what goes on in Faculty Senate. Maybe we should pay attention to what AAUP does and how they advocate for faculty, graduate students, staff, et cetera. So I think, and that that's certainly a possibility, and I think it's a strong organization to turn to, certainly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's the how to organize folks, right? Because it's like you mentioned, even being voluntold to be vice president, right? And it's like oftentimes I think faculty feel like Senate or service of any sort is like, oh, I want to do my research, I need to teach, and now I'm being voluntold to do this, right? And so it's how do you get people past that mentality and having a seat at the actual table with the folks who are making the decision, and then how do you get the chancellor and the provost and people like that. And we're hiring a new provost. So one way we can do that is make sure we hire somebody who is inclusive and wanting to bring people to the table, and not somebody who's going to say, no, I got this. I don't need people's input, which I think often happens in all not just UNCG, all institutions. It's like, oh, I'm the powerful person. I've got the power position, so I make the decisions. And it's like, no. We need leaders who are going to be collaborative and not just tell people you need to do this, but bring them to the table to help them make the decision. I mean, like I said earlier, I think our chancellor strikes me, I haven't personally had that experience, but he strikes me as that type of person, that type of leader. I think we need a lot of people around him who are similar in that way in order to bring, and then obviously we need to mobilize faculty to say, this is really important, right? Either through AAUP or through the Senate or through whatever other mechanisms we can kind of influence things. Because I do think it is an inflection point, to use his language, and the COVID situation has become even more of an inflection point to like really put that fire under people's butts.
I think that, like, in regards to service, and I guess I'm just speaking for myself, but this is my assumption about others, is that some of like the hesitancy to being involved in service is because you're like, it's listless and wandering, and you're like, what comes out of it? Like, I think, Jeremy, you were telling me about, I can't remember what your former chair was, about the committee for committees, right? And like all these committees, but like, I think like service with a point, like is valuable. And I'm always on board for that. For instance, there's a pedagogical journal in our field that is floundering now because, the current editor is incompetent. And so I like offered to come in on an interim basis until they find a new editor to like help along. So like, I'm willing to provide service as much as I can wherever. And, that's one of the reasons why I'm interested in Senate and other things. But like, what I think, especially in this time and moment, and I imagine this is true of all of you in your fields, is there's probably at least one journal in your field right now that's done a special issue on like how your field and what you study has been affected by this, right? Kind of like a rapid response issue. And so I was thinking, like, tying this like service idea, I can't remember what's the journal on campus that SPOMA edits. It's like
Partnerships, but it's they ended it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Because that would be cool to have like a special issue on campus about how this is affecting specifically UNCG, written by UNCG faculty, because every faculty member at UNCG would probably at least skim through it because they want to see if everybody else is having the same situation, the same concerns, same problems. If there was some way that we could like almost put out like a pamphlet or invite people to like write on like a pamphlet, and post it on some website, AAUP or wherever, solicit like 1,000-word essays from 25 or however many people across campus and like coordinate them by topic. And so that's like people could.
Anthology.
What's that?
We just make our own anthology. Like
the Exit Jesus anthology.
Exit Jesus anthology.
Exegesis of COVID on UNCG. That's the title right there.
Exegesis is going to be Webster's Word of the Year 2020.
I liked what you said about purpose. It does sound like that. There's the organizing and the information sharing and the kind of building that, like that they're happening side by side. And what you were saying about purpose, Justin, one of the reasons I always associate with you at the AAUP is because you came to our department meeting and you introduced the AAUP a few months ago. I don't know. It was the history department. I don't know if you remember. It was a windowless room. Here it's where, wherever they might be on a Friday afternoon. And so, people, like when you were pitching it at that time, it was kind of like, people see the value of AAUP, but right now a lot of faculty are, really thinking of other people on campus. They're also thinking of their own salaries, furloughs, family members that are sick. People who are thinking about, what is the stability of my job, of my health insurance, what is kind of going on, along with also thinking about the community more broadly and the community on campus, students. And I wonder if, trying to do some type of similar like membership drive right now at this moment, you might get more people, even if it was not a huge, but anyway, that's just thinking. But I'm inspired by the word that you use, which is purpose. And to me, kind of an organization that's more trying to organize faculty is more important than ever, but then also might be more listened to, more listened to. People might be more willing when they're really kind of seeing other universities in such crisis, and universities that are very quickly going online or having furloughs, that kind of thing. So
well, yeah, and the best thing about AAUP is if you're a first-time member, for membership dues is $15 and you get a free t-shirt. So it's like $3. So it's not expensive.
He wonders why we made him vice president. I mean, you see that pro pitch right there. And by the way, this year is the year, because this AAUP chapter really got its big kick the last time we had a big financial crisis. And you'll notice if Faculty Senate, I mean, people have gone to faculty forums. We have one tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And people go in and they're saying, well, there's hardly anybody there. And I would say, that's a good sign. When the room is packed, something has gone really wrong. And a lot of people we've had a great run the last few years. And as that's going to change, people are going to be wanting to be engaged in these changes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll pick up on what Ann said and picking up on purpose, your comment on purpose, Justin. I think that's the thing that you want to see leadership instilling. And you used the example of one of my former chairs, one of the chair I had when I was first there. I mean, I remember coming in as, to UNCG and kind of asking about service. And my chair at the time said, man, I went to Faculty Senate once and I heard them talking about the committee on committees and I was out. Immediately I was out. And when you get that kind of a message from your chair, it's like, okay, cool. I see where Faculty Senate sits in my pecking order in a department. So why am I going to then go? Now, other chairs have given different advice, but that particular chair was not very fond of and thought what a waste of time, and basically expressed that to me. Right. And so when you have leadership, what's that?
Did he tell you what the Committee on Committees was?
No, not really.
So just like we have a policy on policies, we have a committee on committees. But the Committee on Committees was basically the elections and appointments people. Right. So if you had a vacancy, they were responsible for providing. So it was actually a very important service to do. But the name itself was sort of, and we eliminated it, right? In the last Constitution, It's been renamed something else now.
Right. Well, I mean, and I'll say as a new senator, and I've said this to Anthony, our Faculty Senate chair too, as a new senator, I wasn't really clear on the structure of the committees and what the deal was. And then he sent out this note to a bunch of us and said, you're not on a committee. And I'm like, okay, well, what committee do I mean, and so now I'm on the employment, and actually we haven't even met, but I'm on a, what is it called? The Employment Grievances Committee, right?
We don't want you to meet.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not looking forward to the first meeting, but it was kind of like one of those things of, okay, so, there are committees, what's this again? So there needs to be some education on that side too of faculty. And that might be a place where AAUP could help too, is to say, because Michael Frierson's in as a senator too, right? And so he's got overlap between the two. Maybe he could kind of do a seminar or a session on which he expounds on the minutia of Faculty Senate. Right?
We need a flashy infographic that helps us understand all of the committees.
Yeah, Faculty Senate, I mean, I've heard from people, specifically here, and I know some campuses have stronger Senate representation than others, but I've heard that, some people are like, well, it's so slow moving or stuff doesn't get done. And then sometimes I just wonder, what are the people that are involved? What are you actually doing? It seems like a pretty important thing to me. That's why I was open. The only reason I actually hadn't sought it out before was because I always teach at 3:30 on Wednesdays. I have, and that's kind of changed this semester for the first time. So now I'm available for it. And, why wouldn't you want to be closer to the decisions that are made that affect you? It's kind of the way I think about it. I had one of my favorite professors down at Texas A&M where I did my PhD, John McDermott. He's the foremost scholar on William James and a big John Dewey scholar. It took him for 3 classes. But he was 86. He died a couple years ago. But he would have the chancellor would come to his house. Okay, he always had the chancellor, presidents, provosts. would come to him. Like he was on campus for so long that he had the ear, much like our friend Wade over here, who's got the provost coming over to his parties. You know, having that having that connection to the people that make the decisions is a positive thing. Like, why would you not want to be involved in those conversations and have that link to it? And you know, otherwise you're susceptible to what people making decisions on your behalf. So it's almost a selfish thing. Almost, it's like I want to know intimately like what's being talked about and like how it might affect myself, my department, my friends, and other departments, etc. It's an important.
So Wade, how does it feel to be at the seat or the feet of power? Tell us.
I like the second way you put that. Something I would say to you guys. So I had the opportunity to be in Senate. It was a huge opportunity because prior to the year, Stoll, Burrows, and I were both the barbarians at the gate. The first year they allowed non-tenured faculty in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And we both were lucky enough to have this been their lineup that our respective faculties, selected us to represent our departments. And looking back on Senate now, I didn't know it then, but my advice to anyone in Senate is think of it a bit of as an audition to administration. All those people who sit on the walls that no one knows who they are, right? But they occasionally stand up and answer questions, right? Because this is your chance to be doing things, and you really can only make a 2% difference. I mean, Marianne and I were there. It's like occasionally there's a close vote, and you're the argument that sort of tips the scales. But most of the time, things are lopsided. They're either going to happen or they're not going to happen. But if you're the person that's seen as a positive problem solver, like I raise an issue, and then here's some options we could do. People see that and they're like, next time we need a task force or a work group or some special thing like the general education group, right? That's how those groups get formed. And so when I go back to some of the things, I had a few good moments of reasonableness in Senate, and that sort of just gets you noticed, and they put you on a thing. And then if you, do good work, show up, give your best effort, you get invited to do more stuff. That's a blessing and a curse. Right. For me, the big advantage is not that I've made the difference that I've made. I've made some, but it's that I have a better understanding now. When I was a faculty, I was sort of jaded. It's like there's a them, and they live up there. The gods on Olympus, and I'm just a Spartan out here in the streets of Athens. But now it's like I know it's like one of the things I tell everybody is when you see something happen in faculty, you're like, oh, it's an administrative conspiracy. Generally bet on incompetence. That's usually what really drives things. There's just so many things going on, and there's not really as many people as you think, and they're just rushing to try to get from one fire to the other. And that's why it's so important if you are seen as one of the reasonable faculty that they can bring into and help solve a problem. And just know that most of the time, like in life, you can't make the big difference all the time, but you will make some differences.
That was a great pitch. I wonder that pitch doesn't work for some faculty who don't want to be in administration.
I have zero desire to be an administrator.
I didn't say it's a pitch to be an administrator. It's a pitch to be involved in things, because other people are a different kind of addition, right? I'm the biggest jerk in the room. I'm the biggest self-centered. It's always about me.
I challenge you.
Right? But there are those people in the Senate who you would say, I mean, Marianne and I were there. It's like, I don't ever want to be on a committee with that guy, right? I mean, some people sort of out themselves as like, don't ever try to work with that person, because I call them value destroyers. They will make whatever it is take longer, not work at all, or never finish. It's just you want to find the people who are going to be, let's find that compromise. Let's find that thing that actually makes things better, even if it's not perfect. So don't have to be an administrator. I have no imperial ambitions. But it's nice to know what's going on.
Participate kind of thing, though. And
it's nice to know what's going on and to have those connections to be able to say, hey, there's a problem. And this is, when you talk about sort of my role at UNCG, I mean, one of the things that I'd like to think that I do well is when I see something or somebody brings something to me that's an issue, a faculty member, and I can say, look, I can't help you, but I know the people who can, and they will actually take my call. I mean, they'll take me seriously if I get this to them, and then you can work it out, right? Sort of a referral system. But you build that by being involved and being engaged and sort of having that reputation.
Yeah. And I am hoping that there will be moments for us to be able to return to some of the face-to-face components of that. But I don't want us to lose some of the online things that are going on as well, because I think it does allow for more people to participate in different ways. And I've seen that start to significantly change over the last few years. Like, for example, I can give you several examples, in fact. When we hired the chancellor, I don't think any of the job talks were online and made available online. And I know some of that was because of hiring processes being halfway.
It was a closed search.
Somewhat, yeah. And but then in subsequent other searches, like with the provost, with current provost search, with the dean searches, I know with Dean Kiss, who we have in the college, so much of that was online, and that was really helpful because there were many of the talks that I could not get to, and I wanted to be able to participate. When we had the chancellor's hiring process, because everything was face-to-face, I remember, I mean, you were there, Wade, because you were on the committee. Jim Carmichael and I were the only senators that showed up to any of the meetings that were open to faculty.
For the chancellor search?
For the chancellor search.
Wow.
So
there were not many meetings that were open to faculty.
There were none that were open. That was a closed search start to finish, and that was not something even we had. That's UNC system now.
Right. But there were
invited to things.
There were search committee meetings that were open to
certain groups.
faculty. Yes.
Yeah.
No. There were search committee meetings that were open to the entire faculty. It wasn't the job talks from the chancellor. They were search committee meetings. Oh. And so you all were sitting there at a table.
Okay. I'm
and
sorry.
we were in the audience, and it was the only part of it that was open to faculty.
So the open records.
Michael and I were the only ones who showed up.
Right. So the open records law is until we started talking about candidates, and I didn't know this until being on that committee, anyone could be in the meeting. And like SPOMA would be there, there'd be a handful of people there. More people should have been there because they would have got a sense of who we were and how we had good, and you would have seen that we really got along really well.
Yep.
But once you start talking about candidates, like we were required to read a statement and everyone had to leave. And
yeah. But my point being with all of that is that even the parts that were open to us, people didn't show up unless they had to be there. Right. And that to me was kind of frustrating. And then I did see more people participating as more and more things have gone online. I'm really appreciative right now because the graduate school, and Anne, you might be able to speak to this as well, they do WebEx for all the meetings, and it's fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly, and everybody in the grad school, because that saves my life. I have to go to so many meetings and so many meetings off campus. I mean, there are times that I have sat in a parking lot and watched the meeting on my phone because I didn't have time to get all the way home before it started from a previous meeting that I had at a farmer's market. And so I'm hoping that there's some of that will keep some of this online. And, even in the beginning in some of the conversations, we were talking about the diplomacy aspects of all of this, that there's much more interaction happening online, and that's the way that some of the organizing can happen. And that's the way that we can help save some faculty members time on occasion, because I'm not so stressed out running between all of these meetings that I have to be at all over town. And yeah, it's been actually kind of nice.
Yeah, no, I want to chime in. I mean, I think, it's been no joke for me being a community engaged scholar. I'm the director of our graduate program in history and museum studies. And, trying to do my teaching to the best of my ability, and then trying to do my research just over these past couple of months with small kids. This was an issue before, but like really with the small kids, it's like I have from like 8 a.m. to like 5 p.m. for work time. You know what I mean? Like that's when I have for work time and meetings. And I know a lot of other people, like we have a lot that we need to do. Meetings have been incredibly time consuming. And now having meetings meetings in person. Does that make sense? Like now having meetings online has dramatically improved my life. I mean, my life is just, I mean, like the possibility of like going to meet, like before would have been, I go there, I'm chatty. There's
Oh, that's really ironic that we
I'm
like,
chatty.
I'm totally the type who stays after for 30 minutes and like bonds, you know, and now I do it over like, you know, WebEx too, but like it's a different, I'm not traveling, I'm not doing whatever. And I don't know, I'm like the balance of being able to do of having some of these meetings online. Before, like meetings were just in person, like our department, you only, you know, maybe like others, like a lot of service meetings only in person, university wide, you know, in person, but like the ability to stream and to kind of stay connected in some way, you know, for people, particularly in like, at least in my case, I'm facing like much more restricted hours than I had 5 years ago, if that makes sense. And that will be very different, you know, however many years from now, like it's a chapter, but still being able to stay connected, because that's definitely something that's on my brain about like, how do I, you know, how do I connect with what's going on with faculty senate or provost searches or that kind of thing. And this is kind of opening up my eyes, like just like scheduling, being able to like sit in and listen to like these WebEx, you know, provost meetings or that kind of thing. You know, it seems like more doable in a way that like actually getting myself to the place, being there, knowing I'm going to see somebody and chat for a long time. You know what I mean? Like they become longer. I should have more discipline. I don't, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, I
anyway.
mean,
Well,
But that accessibility is important. I mean, I hope that is a legacy of this, is that like there are multiple modes for people to connect, whether in person or online, or having the recordings that, you know, and, you know, there are parts of campus that have already been doing that, you know, where recordings are made available, et cetera, but maybe it's just more expanded and more naturalized now. People
yeah, I
doing
think
it.
Senate was kind of doing that well beforehand. But yeah, I mean, it just as an example of that, as you were talking, I was thinking I've been on a Senate committee with the provost search, kind of meeting in a smaller group and interviewing the provost prior to when they do their formal forum, right? And so I've tried to hop on the forums as well. But just that interaction in terms of being able to share questions on the chat box and have a moderator kind of say, okay, we're going to take this question. That interaction has been, I think, much more effective than, for example, I was on the HHS Dean's Search Committee whenever that was, when we hired last year, right? So the year before that. And that was at the proximity. It was this kind of private thing. It was like, it involved going to lunch afterwards. It was like, it took up so much time. I was like, you know, just the comparison between those two, and they're different parts of the process. So it's, you can't compare them. It's kind of like apples to oranges, but just the way in which those two things have functioned in terms of efficiency and in terms of getting everybody's voice out. People are, it seems to me, on the Zoom kind of format, people will put down a question, you know, whereas in person, and I might be one of those people, in person, I'd be like, I might not ask that, you know?
all right, all well and good, but it is a lot easier to creep into people's times when you do it online. How many meetings have you had that otherwise, granted unprecedented times, but that, okay, if I know that I can access you and expect you to be somewhere online. It's a lot easier to expect that than it is for person in person. So you're more likely to respect someone's time in person than you are online.
I don't disagree with that. I think that then becomes something that we have to confront as departments in terms of
Boundaries.
boundaries. Yeah. That in some ways, this makes it easier for me to manage some of the boundaries that I have. Because there are definitely times when I've said, yeah, I'm not going to be at that meeting. But I have a tendency to say yes to almost every single meeting, no matter what, and I'll figure out how to get there. And so I think that is a challenge that we'll have to think about going forward in terms of how do we as faculty articulate to our departments, to our community partners, to everybody that, hey, yeah, we may be online for meetings, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But they are easier to check out of. You just mute your video or
I
audio.
know, right? Like all of a sudden.
It's harder to sort of.
And that's the problem with classes online.
There we go.
That's the problem with classes online. Like grad classes online, like, even if we only have 10 or 12 students in a teleconference, we talked about this last time, right? Like nobody's fully present.
Right.
Us in faculty meetings nobody's fully present. Come on.
No, I get that. I'm not saying that's, I started off this comment by saying, I hope we regain some of the things that need to be face-to-face.
Yeah.
But in some cases, we are able to extend some of the online things as well. Like there's not, like, for example, with I'll go back to the grad faculty meetings. So the graduate director meetings, there are significant portions of those meetings that are not relevant to me because we don't have a PhD program.
Hmm.
And so in that moment, I'm not going to lie, Kelly, I do my dishes. Yeah. There are times when we get to that portion of the meeting where I've totally unloaded my dishwasher because I'm like, okay, we're in the section of the meeting that only applies to PhD programs. And so it makes some of those things a little bit more manageable, I think. But then I'm also the kind of person that when I do check back in, when it is appropriate for, like, the content's appropriate for what I need. So
we're at our 75-minute warning.
We are. I want to, before we get to last call, I do want to ask Anne a little bit about the op-ed that you wrote for the News and Record, and if you could tell us a little bit about that and why you wrote it and why we should read it.
I want to preface it. There's an article that just came out in quote unquote on my computer. I don't know where it came out, but it was some type of higher education journal or whatever. And it said early data from journal submissions show that women's research productivity has fallen dramatically over the past month, that a lot of journal editors, are still getting journal submissions from men, far fewer from women. It's been like, and they've been saying it's highly unusual. They hadn't seen it as much before, that kind of thing. And I have so been struggling with that. If you ever come to our writing retreat or in any of these writing groups that I'm a part of, that kind of thing at Graphy, you will hear me struggle with writing. And that's a preface for this. I had really come to a place, or writing in this time of COVID with an infant and a toddler. And I was in a place where it's like, I just really did not have time. If I had the extra time, I had to deal with work, or I had to just face plant on the couch. Yeah. I say all that to this room of faculty that, I've started a practice of, again, writing even just 30 minutes a day. And in that time, for me, that first 30 minutes of sitting there quietly, thinking, what will I write? And just not being interested in writing things for my grants or for my scholarship, but really sharing this story about Greensboro's polio hospital that I had uncovered with my students. And that, like, in 1948, there was this terrible polio epidemic in the city. And the city ended up coming together. It was in the region, all around. People volunteered their time at night. People volunteered gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a hospital, a polio hospital, in only, it's like 95 days. If you can imagine that. Wow. So it'd be like by July, having built like a whole new, COVID hospital or something like that. Like literally they built this hospital. And the hospital today sits on all the way out far east on the edge of town on Bessemer at Huffeye Mill Road. So it's far east. And there's just one wing of the 7 wings that are still standing. And so for the most part, it had been forgotten. And a couple of years ago, students and I, over the course of 2 years, worked together, oral histories with people, do a traveling exhibit, and then ultimately be able to get a highway marker at right near the site on Wendover. It's a state highway, is Wendover. The nearest one is Wendover Avenue. To really mark that and remember that history. And so the op-ed piece was basically just, that story with people of communities coming together in the face of crisis and trying to offer some hope for what we can do today, if that makes sense. So I've been thinking a lot about purpose and legacy in this time of what we do, either on campus, like yourself, Wade, or Marianne, with food insecurity, just thinking like, what can we do? How do we give back? For me, it's history. For me, the next thing I've really been thinking about is I study the history of people in institutions, so asylums and prisons. People in nursing homes and prisons right now are just, who are, historically a term is institutionalized, but basically in institutions, like, are often out of sight, out of mind. And COVID-19 is just spreading like wildfire. And where are we as a community? So I've been thinking about trying to partner with some people to respond to that.
Hey, Ann, I have a good friend of mine who's the recreation superintendent at Butner Federal Correctional Complex north of Durham. And I've been talking to him for a year at least about going out there and doing a lecture series sometime.
Wow.
And brings it up. We haven't really got into. So if that's something, if you're interested in like getting a tour and like getting introduced to some people out there, because he has to do a certain amount of like community like engagement service kind of stuff a year. So if you're ever interested in that, I'd love to have somebody push me into getting on there.
Yeah, I'd be totally interested. And it might be worth, I don't know if you've checked in with him recently. I want to say that there's been at least like one instance of coronavirus. I would be totally
at Butner they've had, I texted him like 2 weeks ago and I asked him, well, what are the numbers like there? And he's like 60 plus inmates, 20 plus staff had coronavirus. Wow. And there was on the cover of the News and Record today, I can't remember which prison they were referring to, but it was like 300 cases there. So
yeah, and the women's prison, there's that prison. Then I think the women's prison out in Western North Carolina is starting to become a hotspot.
Wow.
So anyway,
we always like to end on a happy note. So.
I know, right?
Well, it is. I mean, for me, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like this is where, all of us thinking about, how can we serve in this time? And I've just been thinking about in my limited time for writing and that kind of thing, how can I serve? Like, how can I either be working with community partners or other people to try through writing, through history, to offer people new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, offer some hope in some ways. And it seems like everybody is trying in their different way to try to serve, both survive and serve. I mean, there's,
Absolutely.
Yes, is survive and serve.
Survive and serve.
So Jeremy, I did have a question. You found something funny earlier that we have with the 3 websites, right? Keep teaching, keep learning, keep researching. The joke is they're missing the 4th one. Where's keep administrating?
Nice.
All right. Well, we are
they always do that. So I don't think, they keep administrating no matter what. So they figured they didn't need a website for it.
They can't turn that off.
All right. We are rounded into last call. Anything else anybody wants to make sure that we get in this episode?
Unless you want a song. I don't got anything else.
Well, you had a song in the last one. I kind of feel like you should sing a song in this one too.
When we're done, yeah.
When we're done.
Just sing us out.
Sing us out.
Are we done?
I would just say, the one thing I would say is, to quote kind of Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. That in this time of unfortunate things, there's an opportunity to really make great and positive change. And I'll just take some minor ones, like we're starting to see final changes that we no longer have to physically sign forms and walk them across campus. Right, like there's all these processes that we do that now you suddenly see get suspended, and I hope they don't return. But the bigger picture, there's all kinds of things. We can look at everything. Why do we really do it? I know we've always done it that way, and if you've been at G, we've done a lot of things because we've always done it that way. Let's reevaluate, let's find better ways, and let's move forward together.
That's a much more positive note to end on. I'll drink to that.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
All right, so for the play out music tonight, I figured Robert Hunter was the great lyricist for Jerry Garcia of the Grateful Dead. He died probably in the last 2 years. It's a short little ditty he wrote, some 40 years ago. The greatest song he wrote that Jerry Garcia never sang. It's called "Boys in the Barroom," and there's an appropriate line which fits this age that we're in now. Does God look down on the boys in the barroom, mainly forsaken, but surely not judged? Jacks, kings, and aces, their faces in wine. Do Lord deliver our kind from singing for whiskey, 3 strings on a fiddle, 4 on the guitar, and a song that I love. Many's the night we spent picking and singing, in hopes it be pleasing both here and above. Jack string fiddle to my sawtooth bow. Who loves loneliness loves it alone. I love the dim lights like some love the dew. The only thing I wonder sometimes is, does God look down on the boys in the barroom, mainly forsaken, but surely not judged? Jacks, kings, and aces, their faces in wine. Do Lord deliver our kind. I got a second career if they get rid of me.
Nice.
What that second career is, I'm not sure.
The AAUP state chapter.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We might be back. We might be not. Who knows?
Thank you for the invitation. It was an honor spending time with you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Ann. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Wade.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
so have a good rest of your April. Bye.
Adios.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us for Liquid Philosophy. We hope you've enjoyed your time thinking and drinking with some local college professors about what we do and why it's important. We do take the topic of drinking very seriously, and we want to make sure that no one is out there drinking and driving. Stay safe, y'all. And if you feel like you're having a problem with alcohol or other drugs, please contact your campus health department or talk to your doctor. I should probably also mention that the views of Liquid Philosophy hosts and our guests do not necessarily reflect the views of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro or the UNC system. That should do it for the disclaimers. Until next time.